What's happening, Boot Junkies? About 10 days ago, I released, with a little production company that my wife and I have, we released our first audio drama called Newfield. Just a 2-part audio drama that we wanted to put together, get our feet wet, understand how to put out podcasts, what it takes to put together an audio drama, and so forth. And we let people know on the channel. And I have to say, an unbelievable, gargantuan thank you to everybody who listened to Newfield. I was actually shocked. I was amazed by the level of response. So many people listened to Newfield, and I could not be more grateful. It's really, I have to say, just an enormous thank you to everybody who listened. It did really well. It's doing really well. We got all the way to number 2 on the chart that we were targeting on the Apple Podcast chart for drama releases. We went all the way to number 2, thanks to everybody who listened, behind Passenger List. Passenger List is like the juggernaut right now, the most popular podcast in the drama category that I can think of. They've been there. It's just an amazing, amazing podcast. Listen to Passenger List. And we got to, I think, number 4 on the fiction chart. The 2 categories that we had, that we thought we might be able to at least release in, we did not expect to make it on the charts whatsoever. So just a thank you to everybody who listened. Really super grateful for it. In that last video, I asked if people would be interested in me sort of sharing my experiences about creating the podcast, what it takes to create an audio drama, just sort of lessons learned and so forth. And so I thought it would be interesting to start off with how we did the sound design. If you're interested in learning about the sound design process for making an audio drama, stick around as we talk with Kenny Neal. Here he is. Thank you so much for joining us, Kenny. I really appreciate you taking the time to help our fellow boot junkies get better at sound design and learn about what a sound designer does and so forth. Could you just take a minute, introduce yourself, and give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Mike. It's great to talk to you. My name is Kenny Neal, and I am the sound designer for the Newfield podcast. The way in which I became associated with this podcast was to my working relationship with the playwright Tracy, who was a director on a show that I did sound design for, Theatrical Sound Design. I come to that by way of a music background, composition primarily, and working in theater and other capacities. But that's pretty much my background is music and composition and home audio recording.
From either a theatrical background or from the audio background, like what is it that a sound designer's job or responsibility is, would you say?
So, the way that I approach sound design and what I see as my responsibility is that I am a storyteller just as much as the playwright, the actors, the director, the lighting designer, the costume designer, etc. And it's my job to help tell the same story that everyone else is telling. I need to make sure that everything that the audience hears helps tell that story and helps tell it in the most effective way. Sometimes it's literal, sometimes it's subtextual, diegetic, non-diegetic, music, sound effects. With the podcast where everything is audio, I mean, certainly there is the text and there is the music and there is the performance, but the world is all created by audio and those elements that I just mentioned, but also the environment and what is done with the individual elements. And I think in the bonus material for the podcast, you and Tracy were talking about sound design and talking about the intimacy of it and how it's creating the world literally inside your head. I think that sound, along with maybe smell, are 2 of the most sort of evocative ways of communicating in a non-literal way, and ways that can immediately create in your mind something that can be abstract, can be emotional, it can be in support of or in contrast with what they're seeing. Typically, when you see something, it tends to be interpreted literally. I think sound doesn't have that restriction. So there's a lot more freedom and things you can do with it. And so, in creating the world, there's so much depth that you can provide and so much subtlety and so many things that I think people may not even notice. And if you're thinking about the sound design when you're listening to an audio story, then you're not thinking about the story itself.
Right.
And that's something you need to be aware of.
It's interesting when when I think about it from a voice acting perspective. I often tell people about voice actors is our voice has to express everything that our body is normally offering visually. In a theatrical production, you'd work with the lighting designer and the set designer and all those things. But really, when it comes to the podcast world, all of that becomes the role of the sound designer, because you really did along the way. You created sets. It was very clear. We're in a room, we're in a car, we're outside, we're in a courtroom. Those were all different literal sets.
Mm-hmm.
And not only were you able to put us, the listener, into that set, which I thought was very interesting with the variety of techniques that you use, but for you as the sound designer, you're telling us where to put our eyes when we're thinking about this in our head. What character is in the spotlight? What sound effects? What things are important that we have to sort of mentally put our mind's eye towards? It's really, really interesting.
It's such a tremendous, amount of opportunity and responsibility. It's something that you can put not too much thought in and have something be fine, but it's also something that the more you think about it and the more you think about the story, and not just the emotion of the story, although that's important, then the question becomes, okay, what's happening in this scene? I mean, it can, the actor's delivery can just deliver the lines and convey the information. There's nothing missing, really.
Mm-hmm.
If I can see what I think is going on, but if I can see that in my head, then I can start building that from audio files, and it's fun. It's world building. It's playing God. You're literally, and the best thing is that I have to do this all within the confines of performances on audio tracks that have already been delivered to me. Those can't change. I need to work around what has been already put down on tape.
Yeah, it definitely is an added constraint, isn't it? Where you can't say, oh, could you say that line differently? I mean, I suppose you could go back to the actor as long as there's not too much of a time delta between when those lines are recorded and when they finally make it to sound design. But it's not like you can just say, could we take that again, but try that line a different way. You don't really get that opportunity.
Keeping things working within the existing framework is a helpful challenge.
What are the 3 or 4 sort of main plugins or whatever that you'd use, and in what cases would you use them?
One thing I try to do is really make sure that I go in and clean up the recordings first. Get them nice and level, get them nice and EQ'd in a way that feels appropriate for, like, for example, the narrator EQ is slightly different than the performer EQ, especially when it's one character performing both. And so making sure that you're starting with a nice, clean piece of audio for the performance. The next thing I start thinking about is I do start thinking about pan, just to sort of place the actors around the audio field, trying to add some clarity by just separating the voices a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I often do before I do anything else. I am a big fan of use the least powerful tool necessary to do the job.
Interesting. What do you mean?
Meaning I am not doing. Newfield was designed and executed completely in GarageBand.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you which tool you use.
Yeah.
I'm sure you use Pro Tools.
Since so much of this type of design is assembly, GarageBand is pretty powerful. But yeah, I'm a big fan of if I can accomplish what I need to with this tool, I don't need to throw more firepower at it just to,
If you get to know what your tool can do, get over the learning curve. I personally find GarageBand baffling. I use a different tool because I haven't dedicated the time to learn GarageBand, but it really does speak to the power of what you can make it do when you know that tool. And I think it speaks well of GarageBand that you made it do all those things. That's pretty cool.
I'm a big fan of Audacity. I think Audacity is a fantastic program. But yeah, it's I can actually share, if you'd like, I can share
Yes.
my screen.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Here we are. Here's GarageBand in all its low tech glory. So anyone familiar with GarageBand or any sort of digital editing software can sort of suss out what's going on here. Like many editors, I don't necessarily take the time to label all my tracks the way that they should be, because I know what they are, I know what they're not. But this is just, an overview of one scene where Jane and her father are in the car. And you can see, we've got the narration track, the waveforms, and see where the various bits and pieces are coming in, music at the top of the scene. And then if you expand in GarageBand, you have all of your different automations, and you can start seeing where I'm making volume adjustments to the tracks. But you can start seeing some of the changes I've made to volumes, and you can start seeing some of the elements that I've added. Like, there's the rain in the scene, there's the car accelerating, there's the windshield wipers, there are other elements such as the footsteps running up and getting in the car, and turn signals and seatbelt click, just to give you an idea of that. From what was a fairly simple, straight two-person dialogue scene, there is just a lot going on.
Thanks for picking me up, Dad. Riding in the rain kind of sucks.
Yeah, sure, no problem. How'd it go today?
It was quiet, so I did a bunch of research about Newfield and our family.
No SAT prep?
Oh, little. Did you know that the barns go all the way back to the founding of the town?
Well, I'm not sure that's exactly accurate.
And there was another Jane Barnes, and her stone is in the town cemetery?
No. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. She drowned at age 17. It's awful, huh?
Yeah.
I want to find out more about her, so I brought home this book on the town's history.
Newfield and its people. Very cool. Well, keep at it. Hey, speaking of graveyards, what did you decide?
I freaked out for a minute thinking he was talking about meeting
It's a
Liza.
fairly simple scene. It's two people sitting in a car having a conversation, and it happens to be occurring when it's raining. But in order to give the vibrancy and the lifelikeness of that scene, you can see one, that how many tracks are involved here, how many different sound effects that there are involved. So I can see where you've got the door opening, you've got the car accelerating, and lots of different effects. So that's really, you're building out the set. You're building out all of the blocking, right? You've got the people sitting on different sides of our headphones. They're placed in different places. See, those volume envelope changes and other changes that you have that give, I suppose, room to the dialogue, room to for the actors to act and to be heard. We're establishing that world. We're shining a light on that. But then some of those things, I imagine, have to fall away so that the dialogue can be heard. Right.
So here's an example right here where the narrator is speaking and everything else just ducks down a little bit.
Right.
Not goes away, but just ducks enough so that it draws focus to that narrator voice and informs us that this is a non-diegetic voiceover as opposed to something that this character is saying to the other character. It's all about knowing what to do with them and knowing the intentionality of why you would make a change and what that change is going to do.
Yeah.
Something else I can show. This is another scene. And this is a little more complicated. We've got more voices than in the previous scene. We've got where we are right here is the witch test dunking scene. Right. The choices I'm making here are things that are all subtextual. They're not necessarily in the script. There is a mention of tying her up. So I have some, creaky, thick rope sounds. I have, some creaky wood sounds of the mechanism that's going to dunk her. I have crowd sounds. I have a distant church bell that we hear in several other scenes to help us keep us in the town. And then when she goes underwater, we have splashes, we have a reverse splash, we have some low pass filtering going on to help it sound like she's underwater. Of course, heartbeats, because I'm a sound designer. Of course, I'm going to use heartbeats. Various voices and other things going on. And even to the point of, there were a few places where I was bringing in stock library cues of a female voice panting and layering it in with the actor's voice to make it sound like the actor was panting when perhaps she wasn't necessarily in her performance.
You didn't have that in the performance, right?
Yeah.
Full of sin.
Very good. Now tie that other rope round her waist. If she sink, we need to be able to retrieve her from the depths. Very good. Now, you two men, hoist her up and drop her in. All right, miss. God be with ye. I'm praying that ye be innocent of a witch, and all this comes to is a cold bath. Go ahead then, bailiff.
She'll curse us all!
Jane Barnes, do you admit to consorting with the devil?
No, sir! I do not!
Again!
Save us all!
Watch out. She'll steal our babies. Devil. Sinner. Evil. God help her.
Full of sin.
Are there particular places where you go for libraries? Are there, like, I am aware of like Freesound, where they got tons and tons of sounds of varying quality. Are there any particular libraries or stuff that you gravitate towards?
There are some excellent. There's a company called Sound Ideas that puts out a tremendous amount of professional libraries, and Sound Ideas is an excellent company in the libraries they have. But it's also, like I said, it's not to say you should not get comfortable and familiar recording your own sounds and your own Foley. It's a place to start. It's never going to be 100% exactly what you need and what you want. So having a little Zoom recorder or a studio mic and a nice, quiet, non-reflective place in which you can record when you need, the sound of a cigarette lighter opening or something like that. Being able to create those yourself is really indispensable.
One of the lessons I'm taking away from this is that you can do so much of this production really on a shoestring. GarageBand doesn't cost anything. I'm sure there's an equivalent. Or if, my preferred tool is Reaper, $60, right? You can really do that on a shoestring. The microphones on our cell phones have gotten really good to use some of the real recording software that you can get for almost nothing. But to go into your coat closet and strike a Zippo, strike a lighter, things like that, you can gather those sound effects with sufficient fidelity that you probably could use it if it's going to be buried in the context of the rest of the mix. I wouldn't record all my voiceover into my phone's microphone, but they've gotten really high fidelity for things like sound effect gathering. I know I did, I think a number of the sound effects I had recorded in my scratch track probably ended up the leaves rustling and things like that. And that was a Zoom recorder with a handheld microphone, me out in my yard or in the woods across the street, and just sticking a microphone down by my feet and walking through the leaves. It's
I will just listen to the voice performances over and over, read the script, read any stage directions, and just start writing down just all the sounds that would exist in this world. Whether it's, okay, we need, they're in a cemetery and it's fall, there would be leaves, they're walking around, we need the sounds of footsteps in leaves, we need the sound of running footsteps in leaves, we need the sounds of something falling into the leaves. and just started building that list of these are all the things I need to go find or create. And so I'll start grabbing sounds from my libraries and dropping them in and into a file. And I'll use 50% of them, maybe, but just to have those things on hand and just to know that, these are things that could be useful. Or I could get a note from the director saying, hey, you know what, that's a good idea, but not that specific sound. Then I have something I can replace it with.
Let me ask you this. So if somebody's creating their first audio drama, they listened to Newfield and they went, I think I could do that. I want to try that. Wait, he uses GarageBand and it doesn't cost anything. I think I could try that. Is there like anything that a beginner, the first time person should know?
Recognize that the sound design is a just as core element of the storytelling as the performance and the text. Really pay attention to the small details. Nothing exists in this world that you don't create.
Right.
And so if something exists in this world, it needs to exist for a reason. It needs to be there on purpose. And even if it's super subtle or ultrasonic or subsonic or, it needs to be there for it. If it's there, it needs to be there for a reason, and you really need to be thinking about those reasons.
It needs to be there for a reason. It should serve the story. It should serve to put the listener in the place. It needs to serve the end result of the story.
Right.
It's easy to overload it with sound effects that really don't have anything to do with anything, but they need to be there with intention and thought in order to get there. And it's great advice.
And if you're not happy with something you find on a free sound effects site, make your own. Don't just use it because the label said that this is, if the sound is labeled door closing and you listen to it and you're like, that doesn't sound like a door closing, don't use it.
Not the kind of door that I'm thinking in my head. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Kenny, I am so grateful, one, for your work on Newfield and helping us put out this production. I'm so happy with the way the production itself came out with the sound design. We've gotten really great reviews on the sound design and the placement of the people in the world, and we've gotten really good feedback on it. And that's due in a large part to your capabilities and skills in making the tool do what it does, and also to create that additional character of the sound in the story. So we're so grateful for it. If anybody wanted to hire you as a sound designer for their podcast, Twitter the best way to get in touch with you, would you say?
Twitter's, yeah, I'm not terribly active on Twitter, but it's actually something that if somebody did contact me, I would notice. I am at Neal, Kneal. But yeah, I would love to talk to somebody if they've got a project they're interested in doing. So Great. Feel free to get in touch.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. It's great to talk to you.
Great.